Good morning, everybody, and welcome to USU 1300. Once again, I am Peter. Harley and Aiden couldn't be here today. We had a little bit of a quarantine thing going on in our house for the next 10 days or so. So we have a different special guest. This is my daughter, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
She is super shy up until the point where she decides not to be shy. So she's going to help us today and maybe answer some questions. All right, so Libby, you ready to get started?
Yes.
Only if you want. Yep, you only have to answer them if you want. So today we're actually going to talk a little bit about something called gerrymandering, and then we're going to do a few other things as well. So let's start with our board, shall we? Oh, there it is. This is the big board. So we are going to talk about gerrymandering. And Libby had a question before we started. What was your question, Libby?
It was, what is gerrymandering?
Good question, Libby. So we're going to go ahead and break down where the name comes from first, and then we're going to give a description of what gerrymandering is, and then we'll talk a little bit, Elizabeth, about why gerrymandering is important. Okay? All right, so first, let's take our name. So we've got two things here, right?
Gerrymandering.
Very good. So this actually comes from way back in the early United States. Oh, here, let me turn off my emails over here for a minute. There was a governor, and his last name was Jerry. And what he did is he drew the districts in his state in a really weird shape that looked kind of like a salamander. And so people talked about drawing districts in weird shapes as gerrymandering, from Governor Jerry and the fact that this shape he drew looked like a salamander. So that's where the name gerrymandering comes from. But let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what gerrymandering is. Sounds fair? Okay.
What does Mandarin mean?
What does Mandarin mean? Well, in this case, Mandarin doesn't really mean anything. All right, so what is gerrymandering? We are going to draw two groups, okay? This will be the boys. There are 10 boys, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And these will be the girls, okay? And there are 10 girls. That's fine. All right. So how many boys do we have? Let's go ahead and count them.
We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Good. And how many girls do we have?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Good. So are there the same amount of boys and girls?
Yes.
Okay, so there's not more boys, there's not more girls, they're the same amount, right? So what gerrymandering does is it says we're going to group these people in a weird way to make it possible for one of these groups, either the boys or the girls, to have an advantage when it comes to making choices, okay? So in this case, let's say that there's a teacher in your class, and the teacher says we're going to break everybody up into 4 groups. So how many groups do we have?
I have 30.
You have 30 kids in your class? Okay. So in here, we're going to take our boys and we're going to take our girls, and we're going to divide them into 4 groups. All right? So how many groups?
4.
Good. So we want 4 groups. Now, the groups are going to
5
vote.
and 5.
All right, well, we'll get to this in just a second. So the groups are going to vote or choose what movie each group is going to watch. So we have potentially 4 different group choices, okay? And there's 2 movies that they can pick from. All of the boys want to watch dinosaur monster truck videos. Do we know anybody like that?
No.
Really?
Not me. Probably Weston.
Yeah, Weston's her cousin. Weston loves dinosaurs and monster trucks. Okay, so all the boys want to watch dinosaur monster truck videos. So we're going to say they want to watch dinosaur monster trucks. Okay, DMTs. What video do the girls want to watch? What do you want to watch? You get to pick.
They would probably want to watch Sesame.
Sesame Street?
Yeah.
Okay, we can do Sesame Street. Oh, I'm going to have to turn the board. My handwriting's bad. Okay, so all the girls want to watch Sesame Street. So the teacher says we're going to put these people into 4 different groups, and then we're going to let everybody in each group pick whether they watch dinosaur monster truck videos or whether they watch Sesame Street. Okay? So if we were to do this a fair way, what might be a fair way to do this? Because all of the boys wants to watch these and all the girls want to watch that.
So you could split it 5 on 5
Okay.
for boys and girls.
So one way we could do this is we could put 5 boys in a single group.
And 5.
And another 5 boys in a single group.
And 5 girls and another 5 girls.
Okay. In this situation, all of the girls get to watch Sesame Street, and all of the boys get to watch dinosaur monster truck videos. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what if the teacher said the boys get to pick the groups? Okay. We're just going to erase all of this real quick, and we'll draw new lines. So the teacher says, "Well, boys, you get to pick the groups." Okay.
I want to draw.
You want to draw them? All right. Draw 5 lines for the boys and 5 lines for the girls. Well, 10. Sorry, 10 lines for the boys and 10 lines for the girls. Okay. Good job. Okay. Now, all of the boys want to watch dinosaur monster truck videos, and they think the girls should have to watch monster truck videos too. Okay, so the boys are going to draw some different lines. Again, the boys get to choose the groups. They're going to try and make as many people watch monster truck videos as possible. So again, the groups still have to have 5 people in it. So this is what they might do. They might draw a group that looks like this, with 3 boys and 2 girls. And they'll draw another group that looks like this, with 3 boys and 2 girls.
2 boys and 3 girls.
And then they'll draw another one that has 3 boys and 2 girls. And then our last group will have 1 boy and 4 girls, right? Okay. What this district realignment does, if you think about this from a political perspective, is because there's more boy voters than girl voters in each of these groups. When it comes time for each group to vote on what they're going to watch, each of these groups is going to end up watching dinosaur monster truck videos. Because again, there's 3 boys here and 2 girls here. And so in this particular situation, we still have 4 groups, but now 3 of those groups end up watching dinosaur monster truck videos, and only 1 group ends up watching Sesame Street. This is the concept of gerrymandering. It's the idea that in a political process, the political party in power is going to draw district lines at the state level in order to ensure that the party that is currently in power stays in power. So let's go ahead and use a different kind of explanation at a more practical geographic kind of standpoint by using the state of Utah. So we're going to use the 2016 voter turnout again because, again, it's pretty useful for us from this perspective. Here in the state of Utah, we have 4 congressional districts. And we have 2 senators, right? So we have 4 people in the House of Representatives. We have 2 senators for a total of 6 electoral college votes. And we have 4 districts that are drawn by the party that controls our state legislature. Now, in Utah, that's almost always the Republican Party. Okay, the Republicans control the Utah state legislature. And when they decide to go ahead and draw districts, what they typically do is draw district lines that are favorable to the Republican Party. So if you remember our voter turnouts for 2016, and if we use those as kind of like a baseline, the Republican turnout was about 45%. Our Democratic turnout, I think we said, was about 35%. And then we had this independent person over here, which accounted for, like another 20%. So here we have Salt Lake City. Hey, come back up to join. Oh, you stole a couple of Oreos. Well, that's all right. Enjoy your Oreos.
Oh, what's cute?
Oh, it's okay. You can have them both. So what the Republicans did is here is Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City is a Democratic bastion in the state of Utah. There are more Democrats in Salt Lake City than in most of the rest of the state combined, because it's our most urban environment, and urban environments tend to be more liberal than non-urban environments. And so when they went ahead and they started to draw districts, one of the things that they tried to do was separate Salt Lake City into these 4 separate districts. Okay? Because what that did is it meant that while there's more Democrats here in Salt Lake City than in the rest of the state, there's more Republicans than Democrats when you combine all of these rural voters with the Democrats here in Salt Lake. And the second largest city in Utah is down here in Provo. Okay, and Provo is very Republican. It's very conservative, this Utah County area. And so when they drew these district lines, they made sure that most of the Democrat, like the district that had more Democrats than any other, was put into the district that also had more Republicans than any other. Because the purpose of this is to ensure that even though 45% of the state voted Republican in the 2016 election, and 35% of the state voted for Democrat, and 20% voted for Independent, that Republicans get to control all 4 House of Representative positions in the state. This is not proportional. This does not match what the percentage of population would like to see as its representation. And this process of drawing these districts in very specific ways in order to give power to one political party is what we refer to as gerrymandering. Okay? So, Libby.
Yeah?
Do you think it's fair for one group of people to choose the groups if it means that they get to keep making all of the choices?
I would think they would watch an episode of each, and they would do a pattern.
Okay, so
it'd go boy, girl, boy, girl, boy, girl.
So maybe in groups that had both boys and girls, they could take turns watching different kinds of videos. Okay, so if we were to translate that to the political environment, that would mean that the Republicans would hold the office for a period of time, and then the Democrats would hold the office for a period of time, and we would alternate between the 2 major political parties until a third political party gains some power, and then maybe we would add them into the rotation as well. Now, I do want to make a point. It's not just Republicans in the state of Utah that do this. All of the states have some concerns with gerrymandering, where the political party in power is allowed to draw district lines. So if I live in a state that has a lot of Democrats, guess what? Democrats tend to go ahead and draw gerrymandered districts as well. And the reason that this is potentially a concern is we go back to this idea of a representative democracy, right? So the purpose of a democracy is to allow citizens to participate in the choices their government makes. The purpose of a republic is to give vested authority into individuals that people go ahead and select. When you limit the ability for people to actively participate in government through voter suppression, that hurts democracy. When you limit the ability for people to make a real decision, meaning that you can vote for a Democrat, but there will never be enough Democrat voters to overcome the Republican majority in your district, or vice versa, there'll never be enough Republican voters to overcome the Democrat majority in your district, that causes some problems for representation. It means that people feel disenfranchised about who their political representation is going to be at the national government level. So we are going to pause there, and we're going to see if anybody has any questions about gerrymandering in the chat. Did you just use your shirt to wipe your face? Libby, shirts are not napkins. What are napkins? Napkins are napkins, right? Yeah, huh? Okay. So gerrymandering is one potential area of concern that we have in modern American democracy. The reason that gerrymandering exists is because of the U.S. decision to go ahead and have geographically oriented districts at the state level, meaning that we have a representative in the House of Representatives for Utah for distinct geographic regions within the state. you guys have hopefully thought about this and maybe even hopefully written about it as you guys were writing your papers on proportional representation. And so this is one potential thing that proportional representation might get rid of if you went a specific kind of way with proportional representation. So that's gerrymandering. Now, the second thing that we're going to talk about today is we're going to discuss how political ideology can potentially influence the sorts of decisions or well, that people make and kind of the representatives that they might be willing to have. Oh, we do have a question that popped up. Is gerrymandering illegal, and does the Supreme Court get involved? Guess what? Gerrymandering is not illegal. So the Supreme Court has actually ruled that this is a state concern. If the state is worried about gerrymandering, then the state should go ahead and take specific actions to address it. But at the national level, the Supreme Court has interpreted the Constitution to say national government doesn't have any sort of role in drawing district lines. That really is up to the state. So who's in charge of drawing those district lines? Is it a political party? This is a good question. In most states, it is a political party. So in the state of Utah, it's whoever controls the state legislature. You want to hold the board? Okay. Whoever controls the state legislature after the most recent census. Some states have started to introduce an independent, either a citizens organization or a nonpartisan organization that is responsible for drawing district lines. And so political parties are removed from that process, but this is only a handful of states right now. It's okay. Like maybe 5 or 6. And so for today, the majority of district lines are drawn by the political party in power after the most recent census. So do you have a generalized list of the pros and cons of gerrymandering? What? You don't have that list? Libby, where's our list? I thought you had this. No? Should we maybe make a new list? Yes, we should make a new list. All right. So pros and cons of gerrymandering. That's okay. A con of gerrymandering is it's not fair. A con of gerrymandering is it maintains power for a political party. A con of gerrymandering is that it disenfranchises citizens by making it impossible for some people to actively participate in the political process in a meaningful way. So these are some of the most serious cons. When we look at the potential pros of gerrymandering, one thing to keep in mind is it does potentially, and this is potentially, help organize representation based on specific needs. And so let me explain what I mean by that. If you have to draw the district line somehow, right? That's fine. You have to draw the district line somehow because we have geographic districts that are the basis of our constitutional, are the basis of our congressional representation in the House of Representatives. When you draw those district lines, drawing them in a specific way might make it possible to ensure that certain groups of voters have more ability to actively participate in the democratic process. So if we go to the state of Utah example, if we had 3 districts in the state that were Republican majority voters, but 1 district that was solidly Democratic, where the Democratic representative would always win, this isn't an ideal split between Republicans and Democratic power, but it still makes sure that the Democrats in Utah always have at least 1 member of Congress from the state of Utah that will be a Democrat, which means that Democrats in the state of Utah have formalized power and a formalized voice within the national government. And so drawing district lines can help you identify populations and allow you to make sure that they have a voice by packing voters into a specific kind of district. California is a really good example of this, because you have kind of these ethnic communities that are clustered around each other. Think like Koreatown or something in Los Angeles. And so if you draw districts in a specific way, you can go ahead and elevate the voice of certain populations and give them the ability to have formal representation within government. So that's a potential positive of the fact that we do have districts, is that a district organization can help you elevate specific concerns. The practical issue, though, is there's a ton of different groups that might identify as a special group in some way. And so drawing districts that are perfect is impossible. You're always going to make somebody angry no matter how you draw those district lines. Have states taken action against gerrymandering? Yeah. So Pennsylvania is a recent example of this. Pennsylvania, actually, the state court shot down the Republican legislature's districting plan, and they said it was completely biased and unfair, because what they did was basically pack minority Democrat voters into majority Republican districts by drawing some really crazy lines. When the percentage of Democrats to Republicans in the state is actually pretty close, like a 50-50 split. The Republican legislator drew the districts for the state in a way that gave Democrats like 30 to 20% of the districts, while giving Republicans 70 to 80% of the districts. And again, this isn't just a Republican Party thing. Both parties engage in this. But in the last 10 to 12 years, the Republicans have been the ones that have engaged in this more frequently, in ways that have really been blatantly unfair. Yeah, what's up, kiddo? You don't have to stay here for the video if you don't want.
I want to.
You want to? Okay, well, I can't have you watching Forky while we're talking about this, okay? All right, fair enough. So this is, again, this is kind of this idea of gerrymandering. This is one thing that people are actually concerned about when it comes to the health of our democracy, because if you have districts that are drawn in a specific way to entrench one party's power in that state, and that party continues to entrench power generation after generation, it makes it really, really, really hard for voters to overturn that, which becomes an undemocratic kind of government structure. All right, so that's gerrymandering. The second thing that we want to talk about is actually voter engagement. This says voter engagement. Yep. No, it's fine. My handwriting's kind of bad on
No,
this
it's
sort of
just because I can't read words that like that sometimes.
I don't know. You did a pretty good job reading. We can practice words later. Okay. So this is where it comes into like political ideology and why that's important. Is in the last while, I would say 30 to 40 years, you've seen a fairly significant division between Republicans and Democrats about the importance of getting out the vote. Both parties recognize that it's important to get your specific voter base enthusiastic and fired up. You want your voters to be actively engaged. You want them to come to the polls. You want them to vote, because the more people from your party that vote, the likelier it is that your party is going to be able to put your candidate into power. Democrats, due to a variety of trends, are actually, there's more people that lean Democrat than lean Republican in the United States today. And those trend lines, if they persist, mean that in the not too distant future, we're talking the next 10 to 15 years, Democrats are really going to outnumber Republicans when you look at the general population, unless the Republican Party does something to kind of mitigate that trend. So Democrats are really, really, really interested in making sure that everybody has access to the polls, has the ability to go ahead and vote as simply as possible. And so today, when you look at kind of this concept of voter engagement, Things like mail-in ballots, things like automatically registering people to vote when they get a driver's license, things like allowing people to stay on a voter registration list indefinitely. Those are largely pushed by Democrats because Democrats politically benefit from them. They benefit from having more people voting because more people prefer Democratic nominees right now than Republican nominees. And so you see this trend, unfortunately, in some Republican-controlled states to limit the ability or to make it more difficult for Americans to participate in the voting process. And this is another thing that is particularly concerning. Um, there's really no justifiable reason to make it harder for people to access the ballot. Not in 2020. In the past, in the past, we had things like poll taxes. We had tests that people would have to take in order to be allowed to vote. We had certain requirements on who could even actively vote, like land ownership, for example. And those were largely put in place by people that were interested in discouraging certain types of voters. Poll taxes came around because white Southerners didn't want blacks to vote. Poll testing came around largely because white Southerners didn't want blacks to vote. The initial concern about, well, you had to be a free white landed person, a free white landed male person in order to vote at the start of the United States was designed to make sure that the unwashed masses didn't actively participate in democracy. In 2020, that's not really an acceptable kind of ideology to be supporting because the assumption is we have general education for the population, and whether or not Americans are choosing to actively engage in being politically informed, they have a right to participate in their government, and they do that through voting. And so when you see things like voter purges, when you see things like discouraging people to be able to register to vote, when you see concerns about mail-in ballots and stuff, because, and again, this is important, because you're concerned that will increase voter turnout, that's not ideal, right? We want a more politically active and engaged population. We want voter engagement to go up. And so we should encourage anything that will help people vote and to vote in an informed fashion. And so again, this concept of voter engagement in 2020, unfortunately, does also have a political party divide, where you see more often than not that when you have voter repression coming out, people discouraging voter engagement, that's coming from Republican Party candidates or Republican parties that are already in power at the state level. And that's unfortunate. That's something that as citizens we should, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican, we should push against. We want people to be actively engaged in our political process. So any questions kind of on this concept of voter engagement and why it's important before we kind of pivot and transition to the last topic that we're going to address today, which is political ideology more in detail? Give everybody 10 or 15 seconds to catch up with the lecture. Okay. I need your help again. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right. You are going to help answer some questions. Are you good to go? All right. Oh, we have a couple of questions that popped up in the chat. We're going to answer these first, okay? So in the House and Senate, white males still have the most say in policy decisions and ultimately have more of a voice, right? So I think that's a fair assessment. There are more white male senators and representatives than there are minority or female representatives. So yes, their voice does have more weight currently in the political process. We're working towards a more democratic and diverse society, but this injustice is still the case. Yeah, I mean, if you consider it injustice, it definitely is still the case. What's the best way to be civically engaged? That's a good question. What do you think the best way is to be involved in your community, Libby? Shrug? We should just shrug?
I don't know.
You don't know? Well, why don't you brainstorm some ideas with me? If we wanted our community to be a better place, what could we do? Be kind. I think that's a good answer, right? Maybe we should be nice to people no matter what they believe or what they look like. And this is actually a really simple answer, but I think it's a really important one. If you want to be civically engaged, then I think you need to engage in conversations with your neighbors, with other people in the community, and be kind when you do that. I think the civility is a really important concept in modern American democracy. Other things that you can do are engage in community service. It doesn't have to be politically oriented. Just generally being engaged in your community is a good thing, whether that's through a local community organization or a religious organization, so you can go serve people. You definitely should be reading the news, right? At least 15 minutes every day. You should be politically active. So when election season comes around, you should vote, and you should know what people think before you vote for them. Yeah.
Maybe we should help people who need help, and like great grandma when she's 99, because she's really old and she needs help getting around sometimes.
Yeah, so we should help people that need help. I think that's another good thing. American civic society, not civil, but civic society, is healthy and strong when American citizens decide to get outside their homes and be anxiously engaged in doing something good for their neighbors. Because that helps break down barriers, and it helps reaffirm this bond that before anything else, I'm an American. I might live in Utah, but I'm an American before I'm a Utahn. I might have a political party persuasion, but I'm an American before I'm a Democrat or a Republican or an independent, right? And so being civically engaged out in your community is an excellent way to make sure that you're being active and doing good things. Hey, kiddo. All right, so how does registering as unaffiliated affect the drawing of district lines? Is it assumed that most are Democrat? That's a good question, and honestly, I don't know. I really don't know if most are assumed to be Democratic or not. So that's something that I would have to go and do some research on. Okay. Are you ready to help answer our quiz questions? All right. So we're going to go ahead. I sent this link out to everybody earlier, and this is something that I think would be helpful for everybody to do. And by I think, I mean I'm going to ask everybody in the class to do it. But this is a political typology quiz. And this gives you an idea of kind of where you fall on the spectrum. So not just are you Democrat or Republican, but kind of where you fall in relation to the major party ideologies in some sort of spectrum. So Libby is going to take our quiz for us today. You ready for this, kid? All right. So, which of these do you think is more true? The government should do more to help needy Americans, even if it means we go deeper into debt, or the government can't afford to do much to help the needy? You think this one? Okay. All right. Which do you think is most true? Government is almost always wasteful and inefficient. So that means that government wastes a lot of money and doesn't do good work. Or government often does a better job than people give it credit for. You don't know? Okay. So we're just going to go next on that one.
Well, you could answer it.
Well, this is your quiz, not mine. Okay, which of the following statements comes closest to your view? So the best way to ensure that America stays at peace is to have a really strong military, or the best way for America to stay at peace is to talk to other countries? Talk to other countries? Okay. Do you think that the reason that some people, like black people, aren't able to be successful is because other people just don't like them because they're black? Or do you think that black people are able to make their own choices and to do what they need to do?
Do what they need to do.
Okay.
Because that's not nice. Back then, one of the presidents allowed the black people to go in front of buses.
Yep. So the civil rights movement, first grade education right here. Government regulation of business is necessary. So this is saying, should the government tell businesses that they have to keep their workers safe and that they should spend money on things that help other people? Or do you think when the government tells businesses to keep their workers safe, that it does more harm than it does good things?
Good.
So you think this one? Okay. Do you think boys that like boys should be accepted by Americans, or do you think boys that like boys should not be accepted by Americans? Okay, so 1 or 2. Pretty heavy question for a 6-year-old.
What?
You want to skip this one?
Probably, because I couldn't get it.
Okay.
Very fast.
Do you think businesses make too much money, or do you think businesses make an okay amount of money?
Okay.
An okay? So do you think we should do more to protect the economy, or do you, to protect our environment, or do you think when we try and protect our environment, it costs too much money?
Do more.
We should do more? Okay.
Even if it costs more, we should still do it.
Okay. Do you think that when people move here from other countries, it makes us better because they work hard? Or do you think when people move here from other countries, it makes us worse? Because number 1, okay. Do you think that poor people today have it easy because the government gives them money? Or do you think poor people have hard lives because the government should help them more? Number 2, okay. Do you think that do you think that America's economy helps rich people more than poor people? Or do you think America's economy helps everybody about the same?
Sorry about this one.
Okay. Do you think that we have made enough changes to help black people and white people be the same? Or do you think there's more things we could do to help black people and white people be the same?
What?
So do you think we've made enough changes to help black people and white people be the same? Or do you think we should make some more changes to help black people and white people be the same? If you don't know the answer, we can just skip it.
Skip.
Skip it? Okay.
This is the test, right?
Yeah, it's kind of a test, I suppose. There's no right or wrong answers, though.
Who's testing it?
Do you think it's good for our country to be involved with other countries?
Yes.
Or do you think we should just stay home and ignore other countries?
Number 1.
Number 1? Okay. Do you think that most people can be successful if they work really hard? Or do you think that even if people work hard, they won't be successful?
Number 1.
Number 1? Okay. Let's see here. Do you think that girls and boys are able to be exactly the same right now? Or do you think that it's still harder for girls to do the same things as boys?
I think the girls can do the same.
Okay.
Number
1. Do you think when we work with other countries, we should listen to what they say? Or do you think when we work with other countries, we should do whatever we think is best?
We should do whatever we think is best. Or we can, I don't know.
You don't know?
Both?
Both?
Would be my answer.
All right, we'll skip that one. Libby, are you a Democrat, a Republican, or independent? We're gonna say that you're independent. I don't, you've never.
What does that mean?
It means that you never signed up for a political party. Okay, so Libby here is what we would call a new era enterpriser. She's young, she's economically conservative, and she's moderate on things like immigration and America's engagement with the world. So the reason that I want everybody in the class to go ahead and take this particular quiz is because I think it's important for you to understand where you sit on the political spectrum and how that might relate to other percents of the population. So when we look at this kind of breakout, this is one of the things I want to draw attention to. This is kind of the Democratic liberal side. Look at this percentage of the population, right? So solid liberals are 16% of the population. Opportunity Democrats are 12% of the population. So we're up to 28% of the general population right now. You add in disaffected Democrats, and you're up to 42% of the population. You add in devout and diverse, and you're up to 51. So 51% of the population identifies somewhere here on this liberal perspective. When you look at the conservative perspective, 11% are these new era enterprisers, combined with 12% of these market skeptic Republicans, which is 23% of the population, combined with 6% for country first conservatives, so we're up to 29% of the population. And then we have core conservatives, which are another 13%. I mean, that gives us 42% of the population, with everybody else kind of considering themselves a bystander. What does what mean? Tweet? It's a tweet is something that you can do for an internet program that allows people to basically vomit their words out into the world. So looking at this breakout, again, like I had mentioned earlier, Democrats are a larger, or people that lean Democrat are a larger percentage of the population right now in 2020 than conservatives are. And this is really, really important for the long-term health of both political parties. It's never good when a country just has one dominant political party. It's not. One party rule is bad for everybody. Go read George Orwell's 1984. What we need, if we're going to have a two-party system, is a robust, healthy interaction between those two major political parties. And if the Republican Party in the next 10 to 15 years can't figure out how to ensure that it is adequately representing the needs of more Americans, it's going and wants to stay in power, it's going to keep turning to non-democratic solutions like more robust gerrymandering and like repressing voter turnout in order to stay in power. And that's not healthy for the democracy. What we need to have happen is that both Democrats and Republicans try and understand their populations better, and they create policies and do things that more Americans support in general. And that makes it less likely that you're going to see problems with things like voter suppression. Okay, Libby, do you have any questions before we wrap this up today? No, you're good to go. It's okay. Everybody likes listening to Blue Skies. You guys have a wonderful afternoon. If you have any questions or you need anything, go ahead and let me know, and we will talk to everybody on Thursday.
That was not supposed to be on.